Did you test the mic?
Let's see. How's the volume? Okay, not too loud and not too soft. Okay.
This one is good?
That sounds a little loud to me,
A little loud? Okay.
but you do get soft.
Yeah.
Maybe we should leave it right the way it
Let's
is.
see. Yeah, because I know my, yeah.
Yeah, and you're doing the meditation, so yeah. Yes. Richard.
Oh, good, thank you.
Yep. Hi. Welcome. Richard will be right there. This is like my favorite Dharma topic. I'm very excited about engaging with you guys tonight and starting this, conversation and exploration together about the Four Noble Truths. So, really excited about it, and happy to hear you're planning to come for all the weeks. And I don't know if are you thinking you're going to make it for all 4 weeks? There might actually end up being 5. So. We'll talk about that as we go, but what's that?
Why is that?
Well, there's five Thursdays in December. There's 4 Noble Truths, so I initially planned.
There's an extra one.
We're going to make up one. And then, there's some scheduling things, so, yeah. But we'll wait for everybody to come into the hall before we officially begin. But maybe in the meantime, and Ben, do you mind grabbing a microphone? What would be really fun is to hear, what do you know about the Four Noble Truths? Just a few words about how familiar you are, just, what your relationship is to it. So.
Slightly off the blue line.
Feel free to come on up. You just got to stay one side or the other of the blue line. Does anybody feel like they would like to answer that question about what do you know about the Four Noble Truths? And hi, Mitra, great. It's okay.
I mainly know the first one. It's my expertise. But what I know is that the first noble truth is that there's suffering.
Yeah.
And that there is a cause, which is clinging or attachment.
Yeah.
And there's a way to get free from that, and there's a path that you can follow to get there.
That's right. Yeah, maybe just pass the mic, and if you want to share anything. The question is, Ben, maybe Ben will answer. What is your thoughts about the Four Noble Truths? You don't have to repeat what Mitra said. Is there anything you would add, or your relationship? And if nothing at all?
Or even what brings you here for this series?
I don't think it's like
What brings you here for the series?
Yeah.
I got the flyer or the notification. What's the subject? But I mean, what resonated with me about many of the talks and what I've learned over the years listening to different teachers is suffering and attachments, and how attachments they kind of it's like a cause and effect kind of thing. I don't know what else I have to add.
Great.
And there's I mean, we all have plenty of attachments, and some of them are, oh, this is how I do things, etc. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
So we don't have to, at this point, I want to just kind of, let me just shift and say just one or two things, and then Sandra will do a guided meditation, and then we'll talk more about this First Noble Truth. But maybe I'll just say this, that, the Buddha, this was his first real teaching. And it was right after his full awakening. And after he had this awakening experience and this insight to how the mind works, he first was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to teach. No way. Like, there's too many, no, people are not going to get it. It's just going to be confusing. And then, so the story goes, some celestial beings came to him and pleaded him to teach. And so he thought, he sort of considered, okay, well, maybe I'll do this. And then he thought, well, but who should I teach to? If I'm willing to do this, who should I teach to? And who will understand the Dharma? Who will understand this? And so, he was having his own crisis, really, around what to do next in his practice, in his life. And he remembered 5 people that he had done a lot of practice with, and he thought, I can talk to them, I can teach them. And so he did. He went and he taught them, and they did understand. And that is what they say set. They call it rolling. The wheel of the Dharma was set in motion. That was the beginning of this wheel that we're benefiting from now. Is that very first, his way of understanding the mind, which we'll talk about around the Four Noble Truths, and suffering and life and this wheel of life and the way to freedom. So I feel grateful personally that he was, convinced to teach, and that he had people that he could teach who could understand. So he felt like it was, a worthy endeavor. So, just to plant the seeds of inspiration and kind of the history, the poignancy of this particular teaching. So Sandra, will you do a guided meditation for us?
So I'll invite you to find a comfortable posture. Going to do around 20 minutes meditation. So just feel comfortable, and that you can really soften your body. If you want to bring some movement first, the shoulders, the head, just let your body move in the way it needs to move before we settle down. And taking a couple of deep breaths, inhaling by the nose and exhaling by the mouth. And I'll invite you to feel the contact with the floor. Notice the contact with the chair. The touch of your hands on the legs. And just really feel your body here. Noticing the weight of the body. Maybe going from head to toe. Noticing the muscles of the face, and with the exhalation, inviting to soften, to release. Allowing the shoulders to get away from the ears and maybe falling a little backwards. Perhaps breathing becomes a little easier. Noticing the chest and the belly. And softening. Noticing any holding. And perhaps with the exhale, inviting to soften, to release. It may be that the breathing becomes more clear. And bring your attention to that place in your body where breathing is more clear to you. Not about thinking about the breathing, but just sensing it in the body. Noticing what happens with the in-breath. And what do you feel with the exhale, with the out-breath? And it's not about kind of becoming a monitor of your breathing, but resting on the breathing, relaxing, softening with the breathing. There's nothing to do or nothing to change. It's just resting your awareness on your breathing, in your breathing. Every time you notice the mind is distracted, because it will happen, Just bring it back. It's an invitation to get back to the body, to the sensations of breathing. If the breathing doesn't feel right for you, you could bring the attention to the sensations in your hands. Or the contact with the chair or the floor. And when you get distracted, notice what is your attitude. Are you annoyed by the distraction, or you like it very much and you just get lost? It's so nice to get lost. Just noticing what the mind does. Perhaps you're back to a discussion this morning or planning for tomorrow. Or some achiness in the body, some worry, some fear. And whatever you find, allow it to be there. You don't have to change it or fix it or ignore it. Just allow it to be there. Acknowledge the distraction, the boredom, the sleepiness, that little ache. Just acknowledge it. There's nothing to change or fix. And come back to your breathing, to your hands. And if the mind feels concentrated, if it's easy to keep the attention on the breathing, just enjoy that. Notice it too. And also notice that what was distracting you a few minutes ago, it's maybe gone. And there's a new distraction now. Just notice it. Noticing your body. How does the distraction or the concentration express in the body? Thank you. And I wonder if there was anything in particular that came up to you. How did it feel? Were you distracted, very distracted? Were you very focused? Then- Could you pass the microphone back? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, Tanya, and hello, Sandra. I noticed, I tried to have just the resting of the awareness of the breathing, and then I haven't been to IMC in a while, so it's nice and cozy. And I found myself, I was going like this, and then I'm like, I fell asleep. But then I was kind of not nice about it, and I'm like, okay, well, was dozing off, so I just opened my eyes but I started this meditation journey with Tanya, and never in my wildest dreams did I think I could sit for 20 minutes comfortably, because before, in the beginning, I was like, I can't do this. And then Richard showed me how to sit like this, and it's just all coming together, even if I'm dozing off a bit, so it's okay. It's all good.
Nice. Thank you. Very nice. Something else? Did you happen to see your mind going everywhere?
Yes, it was very much
Yeah.
so. And the breathing, just trying to focus on that and not strain. I still find that even doing this, or at least trying to dedicate every day to it, or I found myself doing more 5 minutes. It's and just to, but every day trying to be consistent, and it's just kind of upsetting when I still feel like, even though I'm like, my body is comfortable in this position, my mind is still very much everywhere else, and I know what I'm thinking about. I'm very much aware of it. I just have to let it be, and that's not easy.
And softening, like being comfortable.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't.
you can be alert but comfortable.
Yes.
So it
yes,
helps.
Yes.
So like you relax the body, the mind also
Yes.
relax. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Anybody else? Any thoughts? Any observations?
Hi. For myself, I noticed things are becoming a little bit more routine, getting into the practice of the meditation. It's almost like a walk in the park, whereas before I would try and hurry up the 30 minutes, like are we, or 20 minutes or whatever, like is it the time yet? And now I'm more kind of accepting, 20 minutes or 15 minutes will pass when 20 minutes or 15 minutes pass. You can't have it fast or slow, 20 minutes or 15 minutes. But every once in a while, I'll have thoughts come up and I'll push them aside. That was embarrassing, that thing that happened way back when or something. But every once in a while, something will come up that's kind of important. I forgot about that. I should probably get to that eventually. So those ones kind of will hamper me a little bit more, what I call more important kind of just random thoughts. But for the most part now, it's not as judgmental. When things come up, I just sort of brush them aside.
Nice. Yeah, just, look at that. I have forgotten about it. And think, okay, I'll take care of that later. But yeah, no, that's very nice. It's the attitude also that matters. Yeah, thank you.
I would just... Okay, for me to...
Go ahead. Yes.
I think there's just two examples right here that I'll start with that exemplify creating less suffering for yourselves, both of you, the way you shared. So the first noble truth is, and the Pali term is, there is dukkha. And dukkha is widely translated as suffering, often referenced as suffering, but actually when you look at the Pali word and you look at the different ways to define it, it's extremely broad range of experience, from subtle irritation, stress, to, distress, to pain, to agony. It's this huge, huge range of experience. And there's a simile that the Buddha gave about the arrow. You probably have heard this simile, some of you, but in explaining suffering or dukkha, one of the things that the Buddha pointed to was, if you got shot with an arrow, would it be painful? Yes, right? Now, if you got shot with a second arrow, would that be more painful? Imagine, yes, twice as much pain. Going to be more painful. And a third and a fourth, right? So much of our suffering, much of our dukkha is like the second, third, fourth, fifth to 100th arrow. It's the added psychological stress that we put on ourselves. So, and Rose, your decision not to trip out about your mind wandering or falling asleep was an example of deciding, I'm not going to keep shooting arrows at myself. That was a beautiful example of not continuing to contribute to our difficulty. And yours example of not tripping out about fast, slow, things completely out of our control, but we often try and control that which is out of our control. And it creates stress. That might be a more subtle, irritating, pressure kind of stress, but it's stress. And the experience, the opposite experience of just going, oh, okay, well, it's going to be 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it is, there's kind of a freedom in that. And that's the kind of freedom that the Buddha wanted to teach us about. And I feel like my practice changed completely when my relationship to dukkha changed. When my relationship to dukkha changed, the whole practice changed. And dukkha essentially became, for me, a very, very useful feedback mechanism. I also liken it to my relationship to using a compass. We use the compass to help us find our way. We use the experience or absence of dukkha to help us know if we are on the path, if we are practicing. So, if I look at if I'm experiencing the kind of stress that is dukkha, the optional suffering, right, of the ways we make things much harder for ourselves. It's like looking at a compass, and the compass says, keep going this way and you're going to suffer more, right? It's telling you right there, this is the way to more suffering, So if you want to go that way, keep going this way. And my option is to stop and reorient and sort of decide how I want to proceed, what the next step will be, whether it will be toward more suffering or away from suffering, toward less suffering. And feedback, like, it, really, what was I thinking? Oh, pain. Okay, so if you get a cut on your hand and it hurts, what does that mean to you? How do you relate to the cut hurting? Like in a really simple way. Like, what's the purpose of your hand hurting if you get cut? There's the mic. Do you mind just... It's not on. Sorry, Ash.
Just for the body to know that this is something, let it rest, let it heal, leave it alone, give it care.
Right. It's really pretty simple, actually. If we don't know we're being cut, we're not going to stop what we're doing that's causing harm. Right? Like, if it doesn't hurt, haven't you ever been cutting not known that you were doing something that was causing your body to be hurt? If it doesn't hurt, if we don't have that feedback, we don't know. The body is going to get injured. And so if we can see that the function of suffering, dukkha, is the same as the function of pain from hurting ourselves, we can start to be all of a sudden, yes, it's unpleasant, but oh my gosh, I'm really grateful I'm recognizing this. Because just like I want to take care of my body, I want to take care of my mind and my heart. So it's feedback in that very same way. It's just that. It's like I think it's kind of a miracle that there's some sort of internal system that gives us feedback when we are moving in the direction of harming ourselves or others. So the Buddha Oh, please. Thank you.
Thank you. What if you're like getting feedback and it's constructive,
Yeah.
and then you know it's good for you, like you get cut, you have to rest your hand, but what if it's something that you have to deal with and
Mm-hmm.
you like let it define you even though you know you shouldn't, and it's like, especially with work, work stuff, so it's supposed to make me better, but it sucks. In my.
Well, I mean, I think, this is complicated, right? Relationships are complicated. Our relationship to work is complicated. Without the more specifics, I don't know how to respond, but I would love to have that conversation with you, and hopefully we can flesh it out a little bit more here over this period of time. Yes, bring your examples. Let's do it. Yeah. So let me tell you just a few more key points about the Buddhist teachings around this particular. Mitra she named the Four Noble Truths. So just to remind you, there is dukkha, there is the cause of dukkha, there is the end of dukkha, and there is the way to the ending of all dukkha. It's very much like a medical diagnostic tool, right? It's very similar to how medicine works in terms of diagnoses. And so the dukkha is like the symptom that you go to a doctor with. This is the symptom I have, doctor. Okay, the doctor then says, this is the cause of that suffering, that whatever, right? And then there's the ending of that particular illness, hopefully, if we're lucky, right? But this is for our working with our minds and our hearts and with others in our life and our conditioning. So this is his first teaching. This is setting the wheel of the Dharma in motion. The Buddha, and sometimes people will say, I only teach suffering and the end of suffering, but I think probably the real quote is closer to, I teach dukkha and the end of dukkha. And it's not that that's the only thing he teaches, but that is primary to what he teaches. Many things he teaches, but they're all in service, really, of the end of dukkha. So it keeps this particular teaching at the center of everything he teaches, sort of a very, very center of it. And another important thing about the way the Buddha taught and about these teachings as well is that this is not like a creed or something that you're meant to like just believe in. It really is, it's like you can believe that it hurts to get a cut, but that's theoretical. We have to pay attention to when it hurts. So it's the same idea that this is a teaching to be incorporated, to use as a guide for us in everything we do, in all forms of our practice, all forms of our life. Another way to think about this is that, well, I think I'll leave that alone. I think I'm going to just see. Yeah. So let me shift to like that relationship, right, to this suffering, to dukkha. Like, so how do we start to welcome when we recognize we're suffering? And that's almost the opposite of what our instinct is when it comes to emotional suffering. Physically, not so much. I mean, sometimes we do. We override, right? Some people more than others. But when it comes to emotional or psychological suffering, a lot of us collapse, or just kind of keep trying to go and ignore it. Kind of trying to like, it's like almost like we want to convince ourselves or the world that it's not really happening. And somehow we don't have to give in to this. Like there's something really weird. I find it weird that that's our relationship to suffering, to hurt, to pain, to distress. So really starting to be curious about what is your pattern? What is your relationship to noticing when you're having a hard time, when you're having dukkha? This is your conditioned, the nature of conditioning, right? Is you can start to notice in your relationship to suffering so much about yourself, so much about how your mind has adapted and is working. And then in that space you can start to like, oh, well, I don't really have to do it that way. So one way that I like to think about this is, on 92, Highway 92 and 101, when you're driving on the highway, actually on 92, as you're going into Half Moon Bay, in the middle of the road, there's rumble strips. And then along the side, there's these rumble strips. And rumble strips are those things that when you drive over them, your car goes, it really vibrates and it's loud and it's quite abrupt. And so to me, it's almost like that's dukkha. We're on the path, we're driving, we're on the road, and, we wander out of our lane. And then, it's like the dukkha happens. And sometimes it's really abrupt and loud and irritating, and you can be like, oh. I remember plenty of times driving on freeways and on the sides feeling, why is it, like very irritated. And that's maybe the natural initial response. It's totally fine. But then, like, if we step back and we go, oh, wait a minute, like, I was looking at the ocean instead of the road. If I had just kept wandering, I would have been off the road. I would be in the ditch. And so, can I be grateful that that experience happened? So that that it woke me up, that it brought me back to the path, to paying attention to where I was and not wandering off. So, am I supposed to be done at 7:20? Yes. Okay. So we'll say one more little thing, which is that it can be very helpful to think about that there is biological, physical suffering. That's just innate part of life. Like, we're born, we age, we get sick, we die. This is just kind of this biological fact of being a human. And then there's psychological suffering. And psychological suffering stems from our reactivity to whatever is happening. It's all about the reactivity, the judgments, which is a reaction, the not liking it, which is a reaction, the wanting more of it, which is a reaction. And so it can be helpful to kind of think about suffering in those two terms. And we can go further into looking at sort of the psychological suffering, and psychological suffering that's based in identity, me, mine. This is about me, it's personal. And it also can be about interpersonal issues, about, our relationship to somebody, how they're going to see us now, or what we really want them to be doing instead of what they're doing. That's an interpersonal form of suffering. And then you can also think about systemic suffering, which is where you might think about, institutionalized racism, things that are kind of on a grander scale incorporated into a system or society that oppress women in Iran. In my view, it's oppression, right? But of course, that's my view, and I think a lot of women in Iran feel that way right now. They're telling us. So, and that's been institutionalized, right? It's become systemic. So there's different, this is said to say, it kind of trying to help you start to look at and differentiate the ways that dukkha might be showing up in your life. Yeah.
I was thinking as you were speaking that the Four Noble Truths is kind of the Buddha deconstructing suffering. So first you have to see it, then you understand where it's coming from. You know that it is, okay, I can be, there's an end to it, and then it offers you not a recipe, but a path to follow that will help you with it. And I think, as you were saying, if we don't see it, if we don't become aware of that we're suffering, I mean, suffering can be kind of a strong word. If you are annoyed, if you are uncomfortable, if you don't notice it, there's nothing we can do about it. I think it's in our biology, kind of plays against us in that sense, because we, in our brain and evolution and everything, we are biased towards looking for what's pleasant, to what's good, and it's just plain survival. We're going to be aversive to things that make us uncomfortable, that we need to look for food, we need to look to be warm, we like to be in community, things like that. And then it's like the suffering that society impose over us, the way we were educated, where we grew up. If you look at the publicity, for example, you deserve it. It's like be unhappy or be unwell or be anxious or feeling fear. It's a big no. Like everything has to be perfect. So in a way, so we have the biology and plus all the people that profit on us because it's human nature to suffer in a way. So I'm gonna maybe give you some tips that you could, like practices that you could do on your day-to-day. I mentioned during the meditation to notice the attitude, because a lot of this practice is how we do it. It's not so much what we do, but how. What is the attitude that we have? So for what I'm going to invite you to do at some point during the week when you feel like, is to bring a very kind, curious awareness. So like, look at that. I hadn't seen that before. Like, I didn't know I reacted like that all the time. Like, we have all those patterns and habits. And we may not like them when we start noticing them. It's like, ooh, I'm not a good person or things like that. We can go really to the extreme. So the invitation is to bring kindness and curiosity. And curiosity, like, for example, you go to a place for a new hike that you have never been before. There's trees you have never seen before. The terrain is different. So look, you are really looking very carefully where you put your feet, like, I'm going to climb there. So you're very careful and like watching, oh, I hadn't seen that tree. Oh, look at those flowers. So it's like, let's check. There's something new in ourselves. So it's a visit, it's an internal hike in a way. I think the very first thing, the other thing is the exercises, like big suffering, like somebody dies. We have a problem at work. We are in an accident, we twist our ankle. Those are like, whoa, you very quickly realize that you're suffering. But there's other type of suffering that they're not so obvious, for the reason I was telling you. Sometimes we just don't want to see it. It's like, I'm good, I'm happy, I'm well, everybody likes me. You're in a group with friends and you're all smiles and things like that, isn't it? So it's that little suffering, that little annoyance that we tend to forget. And that's what I'm going to invite you to notice. And it's because, like going to the gym, you're not going to start lifting the 20, 50 pounds. Let's just start with the 3 pounds, the 5 pounds. And that's day-to-day suffering. So let's say once a day, you sit down and the purpose is put 10 minutes aside and notice, what am I feeling? What is making me uncomfortable? And just like curiosity, like, I just noticed, for example, that my ankle I just twisted my foot several months ago, and he said, oh, my foot is still hurting. Like that kind of suffering, because am I ever going to get well? Am I going to be free of this pain someday? Like I started like going like, ooh, look at that, that's dukkha. You had a discussion with a coworker, with family member or something like that, and you're still running that scenario in your head. And you're telling yourself, I should have said that, tomorrow I'm going to let them know, and things like that. That's dukkha. So just sit down and see, let's see what kind of things are going on in my mind. And notice it. Not with the intention of going and fix it, just see it, like, wow. And I think we all have the tendency, we see something wrong and we want to go and fix it. Okay, we need to do something here. So notice what you do to fix it, to make it better, to hide it. Sometimes we don't see the suffering. We see what we do to cover the suffering. So notice that too. Like you're waiting in line, what's the first thing you do? You take your cell phone and start browsing, like with no particular reason, with no purpose at all. It's like, notice that. So notice the suffering, or notice what you're doing to hide it. And suffering is a strong word here. The annoyance, you're bored. It's like, oh my gosh, do I have to wait? DMV, for example, things like that. What do you do? And then like, why am I doing this? Like you just start browsing, look at your Facebook or whatever social platform you utilize. So why am I doing this? Start noticing those things. And again, do it with kindness. And like, wow, look at that. I'm not doing anything. I just took it out like automatically. How many times do we check our email like every minute? It's like, I assure you there's no new email. And we do it over and over. Like, so, what is behind that? What is it that I'm trying to get distracted from? And see what happens. Yeah. The other thing is, okay, the more noticeable annoyance, discomfort, like it's so obvious that you're seeing it. So first, what I was saying during the meditation, relax your body, take a couple of deep breaths, like, oh, can I relax my body? It's not going to fix the dukkha, but it's going to help you be better with it, face it. And then maybe try to investigate a little bit. Like the example, the discussion that you had with a coworker in the morning, and you're going over and over, and I should have said that, I'm going to tell my boss. Like we go into all these loops, yeah? We add the second arrow, the third arrow, the fourth arrow. So when you notice that you're in that situation, could you separate what was like the pain, what causing you to be hurt or be sad or be annoyed? What was the cause? And then what you're adding on top of it? Can you separate the two things? And again, is observation. What the invitation right now is observe, see what's happening. And it may be that just by noticing, things tend to soften a little bit. Things tend to relax a little bit. What Tanya was saying too about this, oftentimes we don't suffer in isolation. So something happens, and so we have the event, and then it's because you really like that coworker, you get along so well, and then you got so that what they say to you was so hurting and so terrible. And it's also, oh wow, it's my relationship with this person. So don't look at yourself in isolation, but oh wow, it's my relationship to other people that really comes to play. I think like family relationships with our partners, with our sons, with our parents, those are complicated relationships. So can we separate what was that happened, what is that I am adding on top of that, and recognize that it's maybe that relationship that makes it very difficult. I think, yeah, I do. I want to make sure we leave time for the small groups.
Great. Well, that's a perfect warm-up for the breakout groups, actually. So what we like to do, assuming you're willing, is probably to break you up into 2 groups, so 2 groups of 4, and have you share in those groups personal examples that you feel comfortable sharing. So don't share what you don't feel comfortable sharing. And you don't have a lot of time, so not all the details, but just this kind of a brief sketch of some examples for you. Maybe think about big suffering and then a small suffering. Big dukkha, small dukkha. And also maybe what is a psychological or what is an interpersonal dukkha? What's a personal dukkha? Like kind of, can you come up with any questions about those or examples of them? And see if you can help each other kind of identify by hearing from each other and sharing in that way. Are you in agreement with willingness to do these? Great. Okay. And so I tend to suggest people not go into a group with someone they know well. So you feel free to share and, so I just leave it to you to maybe make a group on this side of the room and a group on that side of the room. 4 people per group. Go ahead and, that would be awesome. So go ahead and introduce yourselves. Maybe say your name and where you live, or something. If you've ever been to IMC before.